As our nation recovers from the worst recession since the Great Depression, it is important that we come together in forums like this to share, discuss, and debate ideas that will allow us to better shape our economic future so that it benefits all Americans and not just the wealthy Americans. The economic downturn that fully came together in the final year of the Bush administration has caused unemployment to rise and wages to fall. It has translated to foreclosure, bankruptcies, and other hardships for American families. It has forced countless small businesses to close their doors and strained the budget of state and local governments, in many cases to the breaking point. But while the recession technically began in 2008, many Americans have been living in their own personal recession for a great deal longer. Let me give you just a couple of examples of that. From 2000 to 2008, the number of Americans living in poverty rose by 8.2%, and median household income fell significantly. In that same period, we saw a doubling of the concentration of wealth in the hands of the top 1% of the American population. And we have now reached the highest level of income inequality since the Great Depression, with the top 10% earning nearly half of all the total wages that are spread out across this country. Top percent getting 50%. This point is further illustrated by looking at CEO pay. In 2008, an average CEO of a large corporation earned more in one day than the average employee did in the entire year. By comparison, in the early 1980s, CEOs only earned 30 to 40 times what they paid their employees. So for many Americans, this recession has been a long-term, pre-existing condition. While those at the top have seen their incomes rise at an unprecedented pace, almost everyone else has seen their real wages decline. As we work to end the recession and return to a period of steady economic growth, we must also ensure that the fruits of that growth are shared equitably by all Americans who work and make substantial, deeply important contributions to this economy. In that effort, there are at least three things that I believe the federal government must do, and probably an awful lot more, but I'll just mention three things. First, we must invest in education to prepare the workforce to compete in this global economy. Without a substantial commitment to K through 12 and college education, the quality of our workforce will lag behind, and jobs that should be created here will go elsewhere in other parts of this world. Second, we must ramp up investments in the new energy economy. This has to be made a national priority. We cannot afford to trade our status as the largest oil importing nation for a new status as the largest importer of solar panels and wind turbines, especially when we are ideally situated, of course, to do the opposite. Third, we must revisit our trade policy to ensure American workers are being treated fairly. Not only must we make our trade laws more fair, but we must also do everything that we can to end currency manipulation that puts our workers and domestic industries at a deep disadvantage. If America is going to compete in the global economy tomorrow, and there's no question that we have to and we must, but if we are, we have to make sure that students in classrooms across the nation are receiving the education they need today. Unfortunately, the opposite is happening. Today, our children rank 21st in science and 25th in math, compared with students in other places around the world. 7,000 students drop out of school every single day, and only 70% of students are graduating from high school with a regular diploma. But instead of pouring investment into our schools to ensure small classrooms, sizes, and provide well-qualified teachers, school districts throughout the country are currently being forced to lay off teachers, and to lay off teachers by thousands. The American Recovery and Investment Act, which I strongly supported and voted for, and fortunately a lot of other people did because we got it passed, provided $100 billion in funding to prevent teacher layoffs. As that funding now has run out, school districts have little choice but to cut positions and raise property taxes. And most of the people around cannot afford the increasing in those property taxes. Property taxes, it's an antique way of generating the funding that we need for education. While the House passed legislation last December to provide $23 billion in additional federal funding to immediately save or create 250,000 education-related jobs throughout the country, the Senate, as Debbie has mentioned, has yet again been able to do it. They've been prevented from doing this kind of work. And we know how that prevention comes about over there. That's why I recently authored a letter signed by 51 members of the House calling on the Senate to schedule a vote on Senator Harkin's Keeping Our Educators Working Act, which would provide the needed funding. Senator Stabenow is a co-sponsor of that legislation, and I know that she's doing everything that she can to ensure that it be passed as soon as possible. In addition to investing in K through 12 education, America must also renew its commitment to college education. Given that over 90% of new high-growth, high-wage jobs will require some form of post-secondary education, the status quo that we're dealing with simply is not going to continue to function. It's not going to work. As the cost of college has grown, federal student aid has not kept pace. In 1977, Pell Grants covered up to 75% of the cost of college for the students who needed that help. Last year, they covered only 33% of those same students. The good news is that just this year, President Obama signed into law the Student Aid and Fiscal Responsibility Act. This bill, which Debbie and I supported, represented the largest one-time college aid investment ever that we've ever seen. Though it was opposed by the vast majority of Republicans because it stops big banks from skimming off the top of our student loan investments, the bill invests $36 billion in the Pell Grant program and provides $750 million to bolster college access and college completion, making sure that our students complete their university studies. Also helpful is the creation of the American Opportunity Tax Credit, which came about through the Recovery Act to provide an annual tax credit of up to $2,500 per student to help cover the cost of tuition and related expenses. Investing in our universities is also important because they can help provide the research and development we need to take advantage of the growing new energy economy. America has been at the forefront. This is something that we can deeply be proud of and look back on and wonder about in the future. We've been at the forefront of every major technological innovation in the last 100 years. And with the right investments, we can certainly lead that way again. But we're going to have to engage in a whole host of changes in order to achieve that and achieve it effectively. In areas like upstate New York, for example, I'm not really too far upstate, but places like upstate New York, which never fully recovered from a set of unfair trade policies that shaped good jobs overseas, the new energy economy is an opportunity for rebirth. But that won't happen unless we take action to drive it forward. One example of where federal efforts have driven partnerships between educational institutions, nonprofit organizations, and private sector companies to spur innovation and economic development is the Solar Energy Consortium, which I worked to establish in 2007. It's a small operation, but it is having significant effect. This TSEC, for short, is an industry-driven nonprofit organization that provides leadership, organization, resources, and support for the establishment of a major solar industry research and manufacturing cluster in the state of New York.